Good morning. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to AmCham Bahrain's webinar on investing in the global film and television industry. This is the first time AmCham has looked at opportunities in these industries, and we are honored to have our two speakers from Alta Global Media today. Given the current condition in the world and people's increased amount of time to watch films and TV on streaming services and other platforms, we think that this is a perfect time to really look into these industries and the opportunities that they provide. I want to encourage everyone to participate in today's webinar and encourage you to submit questions and comments to our guest speakers into the chat box on the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by sending via email to info@amchambahrain.org at any time during this session. We will integrate your questions into the conversation and reserve the final portion of the hour to Q&A. I am Mary McGinnis, the Executive Director of AmCham Bahrain, and it is my honor to welcome our speakers, Stephen Adams and Theo Dumont from Alta Global Media. Stephen and Theo, I invite you both to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your professional background.
Great. I think I'm there. Yes. How are you? It's good evening, good morning to everybody, and good evening to me. I am someone who's started my career quite some time ago at the Paradigm Agency in Los Angeles. Paradigm Talent and Literary Agency. It's one of the top 10 agencies in the entertainment business. And was very fortunate to be there for 2 years before I was offered to become a manager at a company called Landmark Artists, where I got to work with people like Eric Stoltz, Lawrence Fishburne, Blair Underwood, and David Caruso. Amazing people at an amazing time in their careers. Learned a great deal about how to leverage star power to make things happen. And I think that's going to be very relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. Had simultaneously started a theater company at the same time, where I began to learn how to produce on stage. And I wanted to do that precisely because you are first confronted with the word, the script, the play, the author, and all those things that go into telling a story, which at the end of the day is the core of everything we're trying to do here. And that turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever could have made. I learned how to take things from concept to screenplay, from script to screenplay, and some of the stage plays did very, very well. One of them led to a series that I got to, that I helped put on and wound up being a consultant on for 3 years. Got to connect with an actor named Roger Guenveur Smith, who had a lot of theatrical works that were historically based. Toured those around the country, if not the world, and then getting Spike Lee to direct one of those as the first piece of original content for the Starz Network. And so that really kind of gave me my signature as a manager producer. And so my core to this day is to develop projects around companies and or creative individuals, leveraging whatever their core abilities are. Through that, I wound up doing a film finance consultancy for international companies that wanted to bring their interest into the United States and vice versa. Through that, got on the radar of a French VFX house called Buff. Buff is the oldest VFX house in France. You'll know their work from things like The Matrix. Recently, you would have seen them in the latest Blade Runner and other things like that. They're tremendously talented. And on my run, we brought in part of Avatar, half the effects on Thor, Life of Pi, Green Lantern, Green Hornet, Dark Knight, Dark Shadows. We had a tremendous run. But at a certain point, I felt like the international bubble, that particular strain of Paris, LA, was maybe time to gracefully bow out from. Did another little stint with another company called Digital District, which had done The Untouchables and The Artist. And then began to rethink things in the United States. So now I'm working with Theo Dumont, who you'll hear from in a moment, and we're representing a lot of international companies in a similar way that I described with Booth, where we're developing slates for them. The Africa channel, we have a company called Invar Studios Global out of Mumbai. We have clients all around the world, and It's very exciting. I think this is the right time for this. Entertainment is globalized in an extraordinary way. And I'm thrilled with this particular juncture. I think despite the pandemic, we are not going to go backwards. I think tastes have evolved, have opened up. I think television and film do things that governments can't do, where they're connecting people in ways that all come back to what we're saying. The core is storytelling. And I think people at their core are very interested in learning about other people and respecting other people and being fascinated by them, being thrilled by their stories, being uh, captivated by them. And I think that's what I love most about all of this. And it's going to be fun to talk about how this comes together and how money is made. And I'll turn it over to Theo Dumont.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, and thank you for having us. Similar story. I grew up in Miami, Florida. A lot of our family were in Los Angeles, so we had the Hollywood bug. We dreamed about working in the entertainment industry in California, so I visited Los Angeles a few times, and got my degree in public relations and communications. Worked for a firm in Florida, which was a pretty significant, large firm, but they didn't have anything to do with entertainment or film. Moved to LA with really no contacts. Started at a firm called Pryor and Associates, a public relations firm, Pryor and Associates. But even at that time, it was around 2002. You had the television business doing pretty well. It's not the TV like the golden age of television as we know now. At that firm, we worked with companies like SBS Broadcasting, run by a gentleman named Harry Sloan, National Geographic, and brands like that. And Mr. Sloan ended up selling that company for, I believe, 5 billion American dollars. And so, SBS built their foundation on formats, and that was in 2002. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation. But that really opened my eyes of how the entertainment business was the right place to be. So from Pryor, went to another firm called Levine Communications Office, and that firm had a little bit more of celebrities and people on different sides of the aisle, such as producers and people like Peter Guber, who are really prolific producers. He had a company called Mandalay Entertainment. So, on that side of the business, it was really representing them, writing press releases, getting media coverage for them. And so that was really the foundation. And around that time, I started an entrepreneurial venture called the Holly Shorts Film Festival. Fast forward to now, that thing is on 16 years. It's an Oscar qualifying festival. But at that time of my career, it was almost like a side entrepreneurial vision, but it still had significant growth year in and year out. After Levine Communications, I went to I went in-house to MGM Studios, the Lion. The first firm I was at, that CEO Harry Sloan became the chairman and CEO of MGM Studios, and it was my opportunity to be in a major company, and it was almost like living that Hollywood dream. There was no lot per se at the time, but they had everything from James Bond to Stargate to United Artists with Tom Cruise and people like that, and it was quite an experience, and channels worldwide. And so, it was really getting the nuts and bolts of how a Hollywood studio works. Even though we were in more of the communications area, marketing communications, it was an incredible experience. And from there, I left that sector and went back to the private to work at a firm, but this time it was for a company called Miller, Don Miller, Miller PR. And there we work with people like Stan Lee, and the Gersh agency. So that side of the business, I really got to understand how to sign clients and work with them. So just with all that experience, I felt like I almost had a master class of working at firms, working at a studio, having a festival that then became pretty significant. And then I met this gentleman, Stephen Adams. And just when you thought, you had mastered the game, it was nowhere near mastering. And so we, like he said, started working with just amazing people like Spike Lee. We're just coming off an amazing campaign for Netflix for The Five Bloods. That's our current company now, Alta Global Media, where we rep major brands, major celebrities, major media companies, and we're producing our own slate of projects. And so it's been a pretty amazing experience. Before the pandemic, we were basically at every festival around the world, from Sundance to Berlinale, to you name it, to the Toronto Film Festival, either representing clients or setting up projects and meeting with people. So it's I echo what Stephen says. It's an exciting time for us, and I'm happy to be with you guys.
Thank you both very much. I do want people to know the sacrifice that you're making, that you're coming to us from Los Angeles and it's midnight your time. So we appreciate the energy you're bringing to this. Stephen, can you just give us a really quick overview of the topics that you're going to try and cover in the next 50 minutes?
Well, we are going to cover a lot of things as well as we can, given the short time frame. We're going to probably blaze through things like development, casting, and we're going to spend more time talking about financing and distribution. I don't know where everybody is, and it'd be interesting to hear where everybody is in terms of their experience with these things and whether they need to hear a lot about them and of course, and there's another side to this. We're open to communicating after this, so please, feel free to be in touch with us anytime. But we're going to start talking about so there's a question here, sorry.
Yeah, so Stephen, can we just launch into how do you begin development?
Development, as I was mentioning before, begins with the word. It begins with the story. Whether that is something that you are passionate about. There's some people that come and they just have a subject they want to delve into. They find somebody to come up with an angle on it and they commission a script. There may be a book that you want to, or a series of books that you want to get your hands on, sometimes obscure, sometimes very, very famous. There are things that are in the public domain that are also accessible to people. And sometimes there are newspaper articles, and sometimes they're just crazy ideas that you hear and you're like, that would make a great film, or that would make a great series. Or as Theo mentioned, there's the idea of formatting, which is basically remaking an existing show, which is becoming more and more popular. And there are examples of shows like that are being redone all over the world. I mean, Money Heist is being redone from Spain. It's being done in India. India is also redoing Fauda. The Bridge has been done in about 5 different languages. And when somebody's got a really great story, sometimes it works in lots of different cultures, or in addressing cultural clashes. So it all begins with that. It begins with the story, with the writing. And once you feel like the writing is satisfactory, you're going to start looking at attaching other elements. I jump ahead a bit because there's the other thing. You've got to option these things. You've got to have some kind of legal relationship to the material itself. Generally, options can go from 6 months to 18 months, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 3. The option is something that gives you the right to shop the project. It gives you the right to take this person's or this group's IP to the market without committing the entire sum of money that you would spend to purchase the thing. So it's a smart way to do development, because development is all risk. There's no upside until something is actually made. So you want to, as a rule of thumb, keep those costs as low as possible. And so I think that I believe in a free option. I think if somebody believes in you and you believe in them, that's not unreasonable to do or exploitative, or for a small amount of money that gets you to the point where you're going forward. I mean, we're doing work with some of our clients where we have to bring on another writer. So there's no sense in spending a fortune, then spending another fortune, and then having this expensive thing go to the market. It's got to be kept lean and mean. The rights in the States are a little bit different sometimes from the rights in other countries. So it's always very good, if you're talking about working with us, to pay attention to the law and or to consult with a good lawyer. Let's see, there's a question here from Michael Sedge. The opportunities for corporations like a major hotel, car manufacturers, airlines, or other companies to become sponsors and investors in films and television productions. Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. There are surprising opportunities for corporations to become sponsors and or investors in projects. In a way, it's almost old-fashioned, because commercial television, for the most part, the whole reason for being is literally as a vehicle for commercials. So if you know, what you're finding now is that if there's because traditional advertisement is failing for the most part, nobody watches it, nobody tolerates it. It's got to be done very differently. So companies are finding that supporting a project is actually cheaper than a commercial. You know, $1 million or $2 million for film is a fraction of what you might spend for a commercial. But you will find that your core, if the DNA of that film and the message it's putting forward is in alignment with your product, then it's a great investment. That can be as simple as your tag your watch in James Bond to, you know, a film called Hair Love that won the Academy Award that really at the end of the day was sponsored by Dove soap, and it wound up being this heartwarming story that won an Oscar, and that's better than any commercial ever. So there are, you know, I think people should, anybody that's in the corporate world should not hesitate to think about how the money they have set aside for ad dollars could really be far more effective in a vehicle that can live for a long time, especially if it's being magnified through social media or brings forward qualities or issues or even just is a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity.
Also, just to add to that real quick, if you're investing in someone like that, the gentleman he just spoke about has now a deal with a major studio on the two different studios, one on the television side and one on the film side, and that just started with Dove backing them. So you know that can go a long way, just from initial short to a long form investment.
So Theo, have you seen any shifts in what people are looking for in development?
Yes, you know, with the pandemic, you know, the game is shifting daily, honestly. From some of the people that we're speaking with, they don't want to see anything post-apocalyptic. They want to see projects that can be made right away, post-pandemic, when the world is starting to open back up. So that's from a real focus group, from the conversations that we're having with partners and financiers. They want, you know, they want uplifting stories. They want things that can be made right away. And it's going to be a challenge for the major tentpole properties to get back in there, like the Marvel mega movies. It's going to take a little bit because, you know, the days of the film sets of 70, 80 people, you know, that's to enforce the social distancing is going to be a little complicated. So, and also the talent wants to get back to work. The actors and the actresses, they want to get back to work. So you want things that can be made and contained. You're also seeing people write in their business plans. It's mandatory now, right, to have COVID specialist health experts.
So Theo, again, when do you know if a project is ready to go on to the next step?
Yeah, the script's got to be airtight. You got to have financing in place or partial financing in place. And then the casting is critical, right? Having your principals. Listen, we work with different types of filmmakers, directors that are at the beginning of their careers, and we also work with people like Spike Lee. And Spike Lee, you know, he has relationships with the talent, so he will call the talent directly to book the leads, right? He doesn't need the casting director to book the leads. We see that a lot with our big time directors, and some of them don't have that luxury, and so Stephen could touch on going out to the agencies after that, but it's really just getting the project airtight, having a sense of the distribution, getting most of the money in there, and then you could take it to the next level. We have another director that we work with right now. He won the Independent Spirit Award. He's hot. He's repped at one of the major talent agencies, and he's put a project together. He's been very careful of selecting his next project, but he's got the script, he's got the agency, he's verified and vetted what the project will be for him. He's got the cast, he's got the production companies lined up, and so now it's a go to get this thing shot.
So Stephen, can you speak about what the best way is to approach a talent agency and what goes along with that?
Yeah, I think they're that big mystery and that everybody's sort of, you know, still a little bit intimidated and worried about, and with good reason. I mean, I think that agencies, having worked in one, you know, I used to feel the same way, and I think that what you learn very quickly is that an agent is only going to ask you questions that you should be able to answer. So if you find that someone has asked you 10 questions that you don't have answers to, you're not really ready for that conversation. And most of those questions are, is this financed? And if it's not, then what is the IP itself? Is the IP attractive enough for me to bring it to a director of note? And if the answer is yes, then you can push that. If it's like, I took a project into several big agencies today because it has a true story about the first known recording of, or the first alleged claim of an alien abduction. And so it's a crazy way to examine American culture. And some people are like, oh, wow, I love that. And the producers who brought this to me are actually very experienced and award winning. So that's a calling card. If you have money, yes, everybody's going to listen. Let's be honest. And if we're talking about something, because I think there's a question here about opportunities for filmmakers in the Middle East, from Mohammed Magani. If you're offering an opportunity that is based in, an appetite for something from your region, whether that is you have access to a star that brings other stars in and you suddenly have a tapestry that's super international, that's going to help with your distribution. If your subject matter is exciting and current and there's an appetite for that, then you've got a chance with that. So I think it's, finding, basically what I'm saying is that analyze your market, analyze your potential market, think about what it is that you have to offer. And that's the best time to approach the agency. And naturally, of course, if you have money and you can make offers, it's the best.
Great. So a lot of our questions have to do with financing and connecting to the right people. So Theo, when should you take on a producing partner and move into the financing arena?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the producer's job is to take the project from end to end, right? From start to finish. It's not an easy game, right? Time to get a producing partner is when you've got the script airtight, like I mentioned before. You've got the principal, the leads cast, and you're ready to start rolling. So here you'll see the different types of financing that are available, right? Equity, so you're participating in the project and you get return, right? I think Stephen is going to get into the tax breaks, which is critical, and tax incentives. We have a client right now. He's a creator of a television show called Shades of Blue, which is ran with Jennifer Lopez, and it was a huge success here in the United States. He's hit a point where at this stage of his career, he's got some ideas of some fresh new projects, and he has them written, and he has a very high caliber of writing where the town, meaning Hollywood, will respond to it and probably give it a green light, but he still needs help. So when you need a partner, when you need help, when you take it as far as you can, and now you need someone with some relationships or some strength in particular areas. And that particular filmmaker, he needs access to talent, and that's what we're helping him with. We're helping him package the projects and take them out to agencies. So it really depends on how far you take it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think that strategically, it's always better to make yourself as powerful as you can, whatever the project may be, so that you're in a better position to bargain. If you're completely dependent on someone else, then in some ways you're kind of asking them to do your job. So you kind of want to, as Theo's pointing out, you kind of want to push this as far as you can. There's something about momentum that is attractive to people. I think that's really what it boils down to, that people like getting on a moving train, so to speak. And then, so in terms of financing, I mean, again, there's the classic equity where someone writes a check. Pre-sales financing is probably less likely now than it used to be. This was a classic model of feature film distribution that people usually got when they went to markets like Cannes or Berlin, and you would meet with sales agents and distributors, and they would give you a certain amount of money based on the territory, based on the cast you had, or the combination of the cast and the director and the story, etc. So whatever formula they were working with, they would pay you out for Germany, they'd pay you out for, Bahrain, they would pay you for the UK. loans are really, loan/gap financing is really, when you've got a shortfall in your budget, and you're able to get a loan against the eventual value of all this package you've put together already. But again, it's super important to talk about casting always, because especially now there's such a crowded field. It's never been easier to make films, even though it's always a challenging undertaking. It's never been easier than it has been historically. So there's more product out there. Thus, the need for visibility in your casting in order to sell it, to make it attractive to a streamer or a classic distributor. Crowdfunding is interesting because it is not as easy as people thought it was when it started. It's a job. It's a really big job. But what it does is it creates an audience, because it forces you to think about, as we were saying earlier, your market, who are potential targets for this film when it's distributed. You start communicating with these people. You start building them up. They have a vested interest in your project, and they have been very successful in supporting feature films and other endeavors that they want to see happen. There's a great company called Legion M that we're friends with that is totally based on investors. And these investors are prolific, and they are dedicated because they're a sci-fi based group, and sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and that's what they want to see. And that's probably the most dedicated fan base in the world. So they have part ownership in this company. So they have a deep vested interest in seeing these people succeed. Tax credits are immensely important. Soft money is great if you have access to a story that fits a certain region, or a certain region fits your story or can stand in for that. You might as well get this money. And this money is applicable to all aspects of production. Post-production is a great area. We have another slide that shows you a handful of places, but Canada is an exciting place. Yeah, we can look at that one. Yeah. You can just have a glance at that. I mean, this is a whole discussion unto itself. These are US credits, but of course there are credits in Belgium, there are credits in Canada, there are credits where you are, there are credits everywhere. And each one of them has to be relevant in some way to your story and or the reason why you're shooting in those places. But, this is significant money.
Well, when should someone approach a distributor? At what point in the
I would say early, because I think you would be wise to have their input before you commit to casting. If you're going to ask someone to try to sell your movie, you might as well have their opinion about who it is you're looking at. And a lot of times they have relationships themselves. If they like the material and or the material and the director and or the material, the director and the producer, then they're going to say, I'd like to partner with you on this. Let's commit. I will focus on helping you with this cast. And sometimes they finance now, because distributors have had to get to be more aggressive about actually making the film than they used to be, because their world has eroded to some degree because of streamers, as we'll talk about in a moment.
So has streaming impacted the distribution of film?
Yes, absolutely. There's two things happening simultaneously. One, viewers' taste and habits are already changing and moving away from the theatrical experience as much as we all love it. The only people who really were most successful at box office for the most part were blockbusters, the giant films that Theo referenced earlier. What we found is that 5 years ago, the classic independent theatrical market was beginning to dry up, quite honestly, and people just were not going to see things in art houses, and painstakingly cobbling together global distribution was starting to become really, really hard, and the funding was going down. And then suddenly in step these behemoths like Netflix and Amazon, and as much as people resented them, they kind of saved the independent film. They started buying them and distributing them, and there's endless appetite for them because Netflix in particular wants to rule the world, and so they need something from everywhere. And even if they're not yet paying the greatest fees for certain regions, they eventually will as those audiences grow. So yeah, they've definitely impacted them. And of course, as I said, it's a duality. It was already diminishing before they stepped into the void.
Well, I know on this call we have some award-winning film developers, producers. We have festival organizers. We have writers, some who've already optioned some of their writing. So there's great talent in this region, in Bahrain in particular. So we'll give some of those people opportunities to ask you some more questions throughout this hour. But Theo, can you weigh in just briefly on the status of the box office and what that means today? Oh, can you unmute him? We can't hear you. Can you
unmute me?
There.
Yeah, no, I'm
Sorry
saying the
about
game
that.
is changing. The game is changing quite a bit. I mean, traditionally it was, there's the major Hollywood studios, like Steven said, tent poles, right? Those tent poles were critical to their lifelines. The Walt Disney Company, the acquisition of Lucasfilm, Marvel, major properties. They released them in the U.S. domestically, 4,000 theaters. The measurement tool was, $100 million gross domestic is a success, and then worldwide, right? Those Marvel films were making $1 billion, just the theatrical box office, right? And then COVID-19 hits, and we have a global pandemic, and you can't. The exhibitors have lost their leverage a little bit. The theatrical exhibitors lost their leverage a little bit because you have a film universal release, Trolls, here in the United States on a VOD, and that grossed $100 million. And so that made people realize, wait a minute, what's happening here? Where people have their large screen televisions, and those theaters, a lot of the money that they're making are from the popcorn and the candy. So I know that's it's interesting. We're gonna have to really examine how the post-COVID world looks like, right? So we call it BC, really, here, before COVID. See how it goes. And then also there's experiments happening left and right. I mean, like Steve was talking about Netflix, they had some titles that are just not even the class A theatrical experience that you would imagine, and they're doing amazing, like Tiger King. Netflix wishes they could make another Tiger King. That cost nothing, and that was a small acquisition, and the business that's generated for the streamer is incredible. So you probably can't do that in theaters. So it's interesting. And then the other question is, how do you measure a director's worth? Right? I had a question of a very prominent news publication asked us for one of our creators. They said, well, I'm doing some fact checking. I just want to see, this filmmaker's film was coming out on a streamer, and they were asking the question, how did it look? What are his most highest earning films? And then I looked one up in the database, and it was $90 million US. And then the closest one was 84, closest to that. And then I'm thinking, well, how is this a measurement tool where your next film is just streamer only, and it's going to be seen worldwide in 192 plus countries, not in a theatrical experience? And how would that look in a world where box office exists? And so it's a complicated question. The game has changed. I think we need a really great measurement tool for streamers, which takes us to the next slide of streamer earnings versus box office. And in the post-COVID world, what does that look like? Right now in the US, we're getting ready for the release of Christopher Nolan's big tentpole film, Tenet. And, he really wants to get that in theaters. It's been delayed a few times. We'll see what happens. The lead is John David Washington, fantastic actor. Christopher Nolan, amazing visionary filmmaker. And they want to get that to 5,000 screens. How do you do that in COVID? And who's going to be seeing that film? We shall see.
Well, thank you. Let's just move on to TV development for a bit of time. I know that you have a wealth of information and had a whole case study on Parasite, which maybe people can tap into offline.
We're happy to share that. We're happy to share that. But if we did Parasite, we would be here until tomorrow.
Okay.
It is worth noting that Parasite, Parasite started off in the United States on 3 screens and wound up becoming this crazy phenom, and is now being remade into a series, oddly, for HBO in the United States. So, you sometimes, who knows? I mean, these things sometimes just strike a chord. This director has been working with these kinds of cultural issues for a long time and gaining steam on the world stage. Certainly made his mark at Cannes a long time ago, but we're just really embracing him now in the United States, and it's kind of extraordinary how that little tiny release on 3 screens blew up into this.
And a fantastic marketing campaign, I must add. The distributor was amazing, Neon, and the marketing was brilliant. And it was almost like it was just a beautiful rollout. And that's another key that we didn't touch on much today. But we do have, I head up marketing throughout the global media, and Stephen and I have a competitive advantage when we're producing a project. We also have a really in-depth marketing experience. So you can assure that when we're releasing our own work, we're going to apply those marketing strategies to our own projects. So like I said, the Five Bloods, great case study on the marketing side. We handle that with Netflix, but we recognize amazing campaigns as well. So Parasite was just phenomenal, not only of a rollout, but also an awards campaign, which is incredible.
I think that's one last thing to say on distribution is like that's something you should look at for distribution partners. Like, what have they done in the past? What have they done that might be relevant to your topic? And challenge them to actually lay out a plan for your story that makes sense to you, that is going to be taken care of, and deliver it from A to Z. Because at the end of the day, it is about getting the money back, but it's also the money's going to come back because the story has been taken care of and given to people the way it should be delivered. And something like this could have been botched in the wrong hands very, very easily.
Yeah, you can have the best story, but if no one sees it, there's a problem. Yeah. So Stephen, what are the differences between television and film development?
On some levels, they're very similar. I think they begin to start to change when you look at who your partners are going to be. So development of the story is always development of the story. You've got to get the story right. But, you're looking at a different kind of a medium, executing in a different way. And it seems to me that in a way, television has generally been a producer's medium, meaning a television producer's medium or a studio/network medium. And only now is it sort of bending to become what I call, you're finally seeing what I call tourist television, where a director will come in and direct all the episodes or put a stamp on it that gives it more of a cinematic feel. And it's kind of a response to binge watching. But then the partners you're going to want are a showrunner who will come in, a showrunner is technically a writer producer who can run a writer's room and also produce the show from the writer's point of view so that the vision is being realized. So that's the difference there. And then, of course, as I said, we're starting to look at writer producers as, people who are almost functioning the way showrunners did in the past.
What is a format?
This is the right time to ask you, but I'll let Theo take that one. But before we get there, there's a question here that says, what are the benefits of non-U.S. governments, in particular in the Middle East and North Africa, in getting involved in global film and television projects? And would be a good contact for governments to work through? Yes, we would love that. There are benefits to non-U.S. governments getting involved because most governments in the world support television and film development in a way that ours does not. Ours is completely commercial. So if there's government support at the base of something that's in development, it's a very attractive proposition. If you have a government backing set of things that it says it's going to deliver, you can pretty much be sure it's going to do that. And that's a great foundation for an international project. So yes, absolutely, we would welcome that sort of a structure underneath a project, because it becomes a great building block to move things forward into our side, which is all about proving worth and proving value and being, being able to go to the market. So sorry, I had to jump into that because I thought that's a good place to put that. Then Theo can take over the format thing.
Yeah, format is can be a very lucrative business. So imagine your IP is everything, right? The intellectual property is everything. The script, the idea, the series. So there's non-scripted, right? And there's scripted, right? Reality and scripted fare. And both can be formats. So just imagine a show is created in your country. The person makes it and it airs on a broadcast network, and you have the rights, basically remaking that property in another territory in the local language version. For instance, in Mexico, there was a show called Betty La Fea, which was a very popular series. It got remade in the United States, starring America Ferrera, and the show was called Ugly Betty, and that went on to become a smash hit, right? Stephen touched on Fauda earlier. That show has been remade in countries all over the world, France and India, and so you can remake the show. As long as you have the IP rights, you can also partner. We're talking about producing partners. If we were to take one of our IP airs here in the U.S., we can, work in the Middle East, find a broadcast partner, make a local language version that, the local producer understands the cultural sensitivities, and they can remake it essentially. So there's certain formats that are just replicated over and over and over in just tons of countries. So it's a big business.
Yeah, I mean, think about American Idol. That was a British show first.
Exactly.
And it's become a global phenom.
Exactly.
Who are the best partners, in thinking regionally for a TV project?
I think regionally, I think that bring a region into our world, I think would be, I guess people like us would be great, because we have an appetite for international content. I would, pay attention to who they are and what they've done and what their genuine interest is in working passionately to bring stories from a region that isn't theirs into ours, and creating that kind of combination. Because for me right now, that is the most exciting thing in the world, is to connect far corners of the world and tell stories that we've never heard before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a brilliant too. We're almost the middlemen. We're in most of the rooms in Hollywood with the studios and the networks. One of our friends had a chance to take a format, a Korean format. He thought it was amazing. He ultimately passed, but that became The Masked Singer, and that became a huge hit in the United States. That was a Korean format.
He doesn't like himself very much right now, though.
Massive hit.
Trust your instinct.
And I can really, it didn't look very good, but it works. It works. It just depends on how you can put it together as well.
It'll be in the right hands.
Mm-hmm.
Can you define the residuals and buyouts in television, and who pays these and who doesn't, looking at the slide that's currently on the screen?
Yeah, Stephen had a show. He had a project called Rodney King that he sold to Netflix. And that was with Roger Denver Smith. He's done more films than any other actor, with Spike Lee, directed by Spike Lee. So he's got the Netflix experience. But Stephen can go more in depth into this. But the broadcasters used to give you residuals, and that's changed now with the streamers. You'll get buyouts, and they'll pay the producer their fee for worldwide usage. And then now, just before this call, one of the major unions has passed their agreements with the studios, and so you'll see a slight increase in residuals, but it keeps changing. You want to take it away?
And just to briefly define that, I mean, residuals are, payouts for extended usage. There's the first run on the show that you get paid your salary for. The second run is a residual. So it's passive, so-called passive income. But, there are shows that have been on the air for 20, 30 years. And, people are, and they're designed on networks. Networks, literally, their reason for existing is to carry commercials. And those commercials still bring in, a lot of money for them. So if you're on a show like Friends that everybody wants to see, they charge a lot. They charge premium dollars for those ad moments, and so those people participate in that money. Streaming networks tend to give you a flat rate. What you get is what you get, and they also, frankly, many of them own all the rights. So that's something else to think about. Netflix in particular owns every right. When you make something with Netflix, it's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that has to be considered. I mean, it can be attractive, but that is, you don't build up a library. You get paid everything you're going to get from them at that moment. So if you're negotiating with them or someone like them, I would suggest that you maximize your ask and get as much as you can, because that will be the end. Cable is sort of in between. It usually does a buyout of whatever, other windows, or they may give you the rights back at a certain number of years. So that's, good, because if sometimes if the rights revert to you, that you can resell or remake. Intellectual property is evergreen in some ways. Stories come in and out of vogue. So I believe in owning rights. So even though there are things we've done with Netflix, and very happily so, it has to suit the occasion.
There's a question we should have. I want to address this one. Sheila says she's a senior director of career services for Arizona State University. They have a large international student population. What advice would you give foreign students who want to make films in their home countries? We created this festival called Holly Shorts, like I mentioned before. That one's 16 years and running, and we have a large amount of submissions that come from all over the world. So my advice would be, if they're students, make some short films. You can make some shorts that, it's the same process. You have to raise the budget. So a lot of the students crowdfund. They get the short sponsored. And it's a great way to get your feet wet, to be creative, to make a short. Put together the cast. It's the same process that we talked about before, and then take the festival route. And find, I would create 2 columns: one, an A-list dream list of festivals, and a B list, which are some that maybe are a little less difficult to get into, and go for the ride. The festivals are a great way to get discovered. And so I would say, make the content, just make it.
Yeah, I would second to that, but I think that there's also another value, and of course, it's off the table right now, which is that when you are a filmmaker who's made something and you participate in a festival, you also gather around yourself a group of like-minded people who are also determined and have succeeded in making things. And so those become your peer groups. And I think there's something very special about growing up with other filmmakers and struggling together and supporting one another and building up that network. And then, of course, we are always about having interns. So we would be happy to have some of your people interning virtually now, because but there are things we do that would probably be very relevant to their process.
Where could someone learn about the festivals that are available, the A-list, the B-list festivals that you refer to?
There's a magazine called Movie Maker, and Movie Maker puts out an annual list of the top 50 festivals worth the entry fee. And that is just a really great tool. Holly Shorts have been there like 7 times. It's a great place to just get details of the best ones. And it's a strong list, 50. It's mostly full-length feature festivals. There's some short fest in there as well. That's a good one. And then there's just great resources out there, like Filmmaker magazine as well, IndieWire. They do specials on these festivals. And then there's great support places like our friends at Stage 32. That's a community of filmmakers that, just talk about, great experiences and places that you should check out.
And it's true. And I think that, everybody loves these lists. There's so many lists online of, world's top short film festivals. They'll all come up. Palm Springs is a great one. There's so many. And as Theo said, the more the better. And I think it's not Film Freeway anymore. What's the one that lets you apply to multiple festivals?
Oh yeah, it's Film Freeway. Film Freeway is the leading one.
Okay.
And there's another one.
It's 1 o'clock in the morning here for me.
Okay. Yep, there's Film Freeway. There's Film Festival Scope, which is pretty good. And they allow you to, you can search on there, and they actually also curate a best of list, and they give you a ranking of the top 100 in the world festivals, and you can probably search it by shorts and features as well.
Okay, so there's another question here. During these last few months, we've seen many successful movies that have been produced in locations which are not usual for Hollywood movies, such as Extraction with Chris Hemsworth, filmed in India and Bangladesh, Fire Saga with Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams, filmed in Iceland. Do you think this trend will continue? And are there any special projects, to your knowledge, that would work well when done in the Middle East? Well, I don't know off the top of my head about a particular project in the Middle East, but I am personally passionate about seeing projects done in the Middle East that are outside of what we ordinarily see. I do think this trend will continue. I think that you've put your finger on something that we were mentioning earlier, that there's an appetite in audiences to see places and cultures that they've never seen before, from angles they've never seen. They keep on surprising them over and over again. So I would absolutely say that it's time for this. I think that we'd be lucky to have them. I think it would be great. So yes, absolutely. I look at, even like shows like Sacred Games out of India, which did so well in the States, or the show we worked on, Delhi Crime Story, that also did very well with Netflix. And those Indian shows were, I don't know that people would have seen them a few years ago, but people are ready for everything. So
yes.
And
there's another thing in Hollywood where we see, Stephen and I have done this a long time, there's trends, right? Different territory will be hot. And so, what does it take? 3 things to make a trend. So the minute they come pouring into, the minute things start working and hitting, the studios start waking up and they continue to buy from the same place. We've seen it time and time again. It was the Australians at one point, and then India, like Stephen was mentioning. And it happens. I mean, the UK, right? So
every time that happens, there's an audience that's built that does not go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, when I was at MGM, we had a show called Stargate. That thing was in 140 countries. It was a franchise, right? That thing made more for the studio. It was just as important to the studio as the James Bond franchise was in the television space, believe it or not. And that was in 2008, 2007. And some of the actors would tell me, listen, I have a career just touring at these different conventions because the show exists and is so popular in Brazil and South America and in a variety of territories. And half the people in the studio, they probably didn't realize how popular the talent can just make an entire career just off the show all over the world, just because the show is global. So that tells you, that's Stargate. Imagine a money heist. Imagine some of these other shows that are mega content.
Mm. Well, I know that you have projects, television and film, that are seeking investors, and my sense is that you would take an interesting project and potentially help people find their investors, take it on, that you're looking in both directions for.
Absolutely. We have projects that we would love to talk to you guys about, and we would love to hear about yours. And somebody's asking about documentaries. I think we are almost out of time, but I think documentaries are great. They've come into their own in the last decade, and are performing better than they've ever. They used to be seen as sort of academic and not very interesting, and in fact they are probably the most fascinating. I think people look and they're hungry for facts and rigorous presentation of fascinating subjects, and people who like documentaries want that edge of truth that we're sorely lacking in this sort of age of fake news. So I'm all about documentaries, and I think, you know, you guys should feel free to email us, and let's continue the dialogue and see what else we can come up with.
Well, I want to thank you very much on behalf of AmCham, our members, and our attendees today for your time and just the fantastic wealth of information that you've shared with us. And I know it's just the tip of the iceberg. But just as you have just done, we encourage anyone who would like to ask further questions or be in touch with you about their own projects to get in contact with you on the information that's on the screen now. A recording of this webinar will be emailed to all registrants and posted on AmCham's YouTube channel for further viewing. And we thank you very much, Stephen and Theo, for staying up late. And we wish you sweet dreams as you end your long day. And we thank everyone who joined us this morning. And we wish everyone a good day, good health, creative projects, and prosperous business. So we say goodbye for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bye. Good luck.